research and advocacy organization devoted to highlighting stories of hope and success in food systems across the globe and really activating, inspiring, and motivating policymakers, farmers, eaters, businesses, all of you in this room to make positive change towards our food and agriculture systems. I want to thank the Nature Conservancy for inviting me to moderate today's panel. It's a real honor to be with all of you. And I just want to set the context for today's discussions. This is all stuff you've heard before, but I think it bears worth repeating. Recent reports from the IPCC show that we require more ambitious plans, to say the least, if we are going to lower the rise in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees. As we all know, our food and agriculture systems are major contributors to rising temperatures and the degradation of ecosystems. Food systems account for 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions, 70% of all fresh water usage, and 90% of land use. But the good news is we can transform our food and agriculture systems and make them part of the solution to our most pressing environmental and social challenges. Transitioning to more nature-positive production practices can support agricultural resilience, improve fresh water management, increase resilience to climate change, protect biodiversity, and raise incomes in communities. But these practices need real investment and finance to scale them up and out. We have a really wonderful group of experts who will explore this topic in more detail. But first, it is really my true honor to introduce Lord Bennion, the Minister of State at the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, or DEFRA, in the United Kingdom, who will provide an opening keynote address. Lord Bennion, I can't say what an honor it is to meet you. My co-founder, his wife, is from the UK, and she knows you and is a big fan. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Danielle, and the honor's entirely mine. It's great to be here, and I want to thank the Nature Conservancy for all they do. You're a remarkable organization, and I'm delighted that there's a good footprint of the organization in the UK, and I look forward to working with them in the future. And thank you for what you do with Food Tank, because I think it's another great addition to the debate. And we're doing a lot of talking over this couple of weeks, and it's really important that we are rooted in delivery, in action that is felt by people right across this planet, and nowhere more important as we talk about agriculture today. I'm really excited to hear a discussion on not just a sustainable food system future, but a regenerative one, and what in practice that means. Climate and nature are inextricably linked. We cannot think about sustainable food systems without nature positive, not just neutral, but nature positive solutions that reinvigorate and directly benefit our ecosystems. Governments do have a pivotal role here. What does supporting a regenerative system mean in practice? Well, perhaps I can just stimulate the debate by giving you three main suggestions. First, it means changing government policy and incentives that lead to harmful agricultural practices. We cannot scale up sustainable food systems without a supportive, enabling governance structure in place. Modelling by the World Bank and IFPRI suggests that redirecting $70 billion of annual public support for climate-smart innovation could deliver net economic gains of $2.4 trillion in 2040, whilst reducing the harmful effects of the current agricultural support. That is an enormous gain for our planet and for future generations. In the UK, we are in the process of radically reforming our agricultural policy. We believe that sustainable agricultural practices and food security go hand in hand. That's why we're moving away from untargeted, area-based support payments to create systems that support and empower farmers and landowners to take actions on their land that benefit people and nature whilst increasing productivity. Our new environmental land management schemes are being rolled out and will support farmers to produce environmental and climate outcomes through both small and large-scale land use change and habitat and ecosystem restoration. And this is money that's going directly to farmers to do the right thing. At the moment we have a system, or what we've had in the last few decades, is a system where 55% of the money went to the 10% largest farmers and landowners. We want to democratize this, make sure we're getting it through to the smaller farmers in some of the most challenging environments, and make sure that it is effective for our climate and for the public goods that it delivers. So these measures go in parallel to our productivity schemes, such as the £270 million Farm Innovation Programme, which provides grants to help businesses upgrade technology and investment in innovation. By maximising productivity and sustainability, we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Second, alongside this, there needs to be government-to-government collaboration. We operate in global markets and need to share knowledge on how to make these policy transitions work. The policy dialogue on transition to sustainable agriculture, which the UK has co-convened with the World Bank through our COP26 presidency, has established a peer-to-peer dialogue for repurposing of policy incentives and support for harmful agriculture. The policy dialogue has brought together over 45 countries to share evidence, share knowledge and experience around the world about how to deliver triple wins for people, climate and nature. It's important that we continue both the UNFCCC as well as the CBD context as we move towards the global biodiversity framework. Continued investment in research, evidence and data will be important in supporting this. The UK is establishing a £40 million research and development programme, the Global Centre on Biodiversity for Climate, and its aim is to support countries to better value, protect, restore and sustainably use nature to tackle climate change and poverty. It's already supporting innovative new research that's helping to scope our future research focus. For example, Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, an institution that I'm so proud to be the minister involved with. It's absolutely an extraordinary organisation, was front and centre at COP26 and has been instrumental in trying to get us to link the nature piece with the whole climate debate. And what they are doing is working with local partners, supporting the identification and sustainable use of underutilised plant species for food and medicines, and we're doing that in Ethiopia, Guinea and Sierra Leone to enhance community resilience. Thirdly, governments need to take advantage of the growing financial opportunities being created in this space. In October, UN Climate Change High-Level Champions report concludes that developing and tapping solutions for a net zero, nature positive, resilient food system could generate up to $4.5 trillion worth of new business opportunities annually by 2030. So there is a real economic driver behind this as well. We see representation at COP27 from private sector partners, farmers, financial institutions and governments. None of these can make the fundamental changes we need alone. But by collaborating, by working together, we can achieve more together. Through public-private partnerships, governments can and must help leverage private finance to support these transitions at scale. And the viability of these investments is increasingly clear, not least as we start to reward people not just for the food that they produce, but for the climate and biodiversity benefits they are delivering. At home, our 25-year environment plan and our green finance strategy set out how unlocking private sector investment in our domestic natural environment is essential to meeting both our agricultural transition and environmental ambitions, and the targets that they have together. These are boosting productivity by enabling farmers to generate income from selling ecosystem services, for example, carbon sequestration, biodiversity and water quality, and natural flood management, alongside food production. The two are not mutually exclusive. We have to think of them as part of the whole. Through our Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund, we are creating a pipeline of projects for the private sector to invest in and develop new funding models that can be replicated elsewhere. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more from the panel on how we can make regenerative agricultural solutions a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Round of applause, please. Thank you, Lord Bunyan. Yes, please. And I was so honored to have you here. And while I ask our other panelists to just come on up, that would be great. I want to point out some of the things that Lord Bunyan said. I'm so glad that he mentioned Kew Gardens and the incredible work that they're doing to support those underutilized crops in other countries, because those crops are going to be the most resilient to climate change. They're going to be the foods of the future in so many ways. And I'm excited also to hear, as Lord Benyon said, what this panel considers what regenerative agriculture systems look like, what they look, how they work, and what they actually are. So I'm just going to dive right in and introduce everyone. First, I'd like to introduce Marilyn Hershey, the chair of U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action, who is a dairy farmer. Thank you for being here, Marilyn. Round of applause for Marilyn, please. We need some energy in this room. We also have Ezgi Barzenas, right? The Chief Sustainability Officer with AB InBev. Thank you for being here. Round of applause, please. Next is my heroine, Darcy Vetter, the Global Policy Director for the Nature Conservancy. A round of applause for Darcy, please. Heroine, I should have said. She's my heroine. I'd also like to introduce Fabio Luis Guido, the ESG Strategy and Sustainability Manager for Itaú Unibanco. Round of applause. And we also have Purvi Mehta, the Deputy Director for Agriculture at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So nice to see you. And we're joined by the amazing Esther Penunia Benzuela, the Secretary General for the Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development, another heroine in this movement. Thank you so much for being here. And by the way, I love all these people. They're all doing incredible work to support our food and agriculture systems. So, Marilyn, I do want to start with you. You're on this side. Thank you. As a dairy farmer, there's a lot on your plate. Dairy farmers have suffered tremendously in the United States over not just the last decade, but the last maybe 30 years. It's been a struggle. And as the chair of USFRA, as I like to call it, I'm wondering, what are the key challenges for you as you work towards more resilient, regenerative food systems? And then what does regenerative actually mean to someone like you?
Thank you, and it's an honor to be here, honored to be a part of this powerhouse panel that we have here, and two really, really good, thoughtful questions, so thank you. It has been a struggle, and when I look at changes that we have had to make on our dairy farm is about an hour west of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. We are 40 minutes north of the Chesapeake Bay, which I look at that amazing mural or photograph up there, but we have a large watershed in the Chesapeake Bay, and so soil quality, water quality has always been on our radar, something we think about. And we have made, when I look at the changes that we've made, the positive changes we've made, whether it's stream bank fencing, which protects the creeks that run through our farms, or whether it's improving our soil, no-till, minimal till, and making sure the soil has the proper nutrients so that it can grow a quality crop. All of those are things that we have, practices that we have put into place. We also have a methane digester that will capture the methane from the manure and convert it to electricity. We've turned our digester over the years, continuing to make improvements, but have turned that into also a food waste recycler where we're capturing food waste. We also, with Philadelphia nearby, are able to take produce from the Philadelphia produce auction that would normally be put into a landfill, and it would emit 10 times more carbon than it does by feeding it to the cows. So we're able to incorporate that. And those are just some examples of changes that farmers are making, that we have made personally. Farmers, in the United States, it's a very diverse industry.
Right.
We have small farms, large farms, and so when we look across the industry, we have to look at solutions that fit every style farmer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel like, and Marilyn, from what I understand, you're running a very big operation in terms of the production. You have this methane digester. You're not able to use the manure as compost. It has to be used in other ways. And I think farmers in the United States have been blamed for a lot of things, but there are changes happening.
There are changes, and we do, in the United States, it would be considered a medium-sized farm with 800 cows. With having a digester, we're able to recycle that, so it comes out in two different forms. The water, it comes out in water, which is used back on the fields, so that's recycled to make sure we're feeding our soil. And then the dry matter that comes out, we recycle that. We put that back into the bedding for our cows, and the cows can lay on that. It gives them a nice bed to lay on. So there's a lot of things we are. When I look at what we need collaboration. We need broad collaboration. When I think of regenerative, yes, we need to define regenerative. We need to make sure it's a definition that will equip farmers in every part of this globe. So we don't need a definition that only reaches one part of this world.
Sure.
But broadly have a definition that equips farmers to be able to farm the way they need to, to be regenerative and be profitable.
Thanks, Marilyn. I do want to come back to that idea of defining regeneration and what it means. Australia, or Esther, sorry, whichever works. You're doing something that's very different than Maryland in terms of you're working with smallholder producers, and I'm wondering, what do these smallholder farmers need from your perspective? Where are the knowledge gaps? Where do they need more investment in what they are doing on a small level that has really big impacts?
Yes, thank you very much, Danielle, for your question. When we say small, in our experience, small means 2 hectares on the average of land. No? So what is done? What do we need? No, what do we need? So basically, what we will need will be scaling up. No? Scaling up. What are the current agroecological approaches, regenerative approaches that we have been innovating and experimenting on our farm? No? So as I talk, I remember our member, for example, in Philippines and in Cambodia, in a 2-hectare land, you can see fruit trees, you can see wood trees there, you can see ducks, chicken, pigs, goats, and cows. You can see flowers there, okay, and some fruit trees, and these are all part of having an integrated, diversified, organic agroecological farms. And we think that this kind of farming contributes to soil health, to biodiversity, as well as because of the diversified crops, we can have diversified sources of income, and thus we are less vulnerable to climate change when it attacks us. Okay?
Absolutely, and to other global shocks as well, whether it's another pandemic or something else. Marilyn and Australia, because you're both farmers working on the land, I think it's important for you to talk about again what you need as farmers from both the public and private sector to be successful.
Good question. You know, we need funding. I'll give an example. There's a dairy farm in Washington that very close to the rivers that there's salmon and it very sensitive area. And that dairy farm had a technology in place where it actually, the whole water system in the farm was inclusive to that farm. It was closed, and it recycled, it had filters, and it brought the water back from the manure lagoon to drinkable water for the cows. That technology, that recycling of water was amazing. It was an amazing technology. They had to stop using it because of the cost. And so and this was 5-10 years ago. So knowing that there were technologies like that 5-10 years ago, if we had the proper funding, we would be able to have all farms be regenerative.
Thank you. Please.
And for us, we really need policies and programs that will incentivize and that will encourage family farmers to go into agroecological and regenerative approaches. And I agree that we need funding, because even if there are policies in our government, our experience is that we need to be actively engaged in the implementation of these policies. We need to claim our rights to these policies and programs. And to be able to do that, we will need financing to build our agency. Our speaker earlier said empowerment. We need financing to empower ourselves so that we could engage our governments to get these policies and programs, as well as to deliver services, especially economic services, to these members. We know that there is financing out there for climate adaptation, but the big problem is we cannot even access these funds.
Right.
And so we will need to ask for climate financing that is directly put, that we can directly access through our organizations and cooperatives. And hope that will come true in this COP27.
Here, here. Darcy, those questions about policy, I think, are integral to what TNC, the Nature Conservancy, does. And I'm wondering if you can comment on how you're looking at sort of this regulatory and policy framework for helping farmers gain the access to resources that they need.
Absolutely. I think when you think about the role of policy and government in assisting the regenerative food systems transformation, really three things come to mind that I think governments could do more and better. And the first one won't surprise you. You've heard it already. I'm going to say it again, and it's money. They can invest. So we can invest, we can align incentives, and we can create certainty as government. And so first of all, if you think about the amount of climate finance that goes toward adaptation, it's like 3% of the money we already have. We need that to be more like 20%, and it needs to be 20% of a much bigger pot, right? And that if you think about agriculture and the challenges it is already facing from climate change, our productivity and food production has gone down about 20% based on warming, volatility, pest pressure. That will only increase. And so again, that adaptation, making farmers more resilient in the face of greater volatility, is incredibly important. And I think it's also important to remember that when we're talking about food, that old adage that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is absolutely true. As farmers both give back to the land in a regenerative way, they are not only storing carbon and reducing those impacts, but if we don't invest in food and keep that productivity high, then you see more forest clearing. You see migration of people who, move because of hunger, and we just increase the pressures on our climate. So important that we invest. The second thing is aligning incentives, and you heard a little bit of that already from the farmer perspective. If I am a farmer and I'm thinking about the kinds of government interface, and no matter where you live, government is very involved in providing subsidies, farm programs, interaction with farmers. It should be as easy, as affordable, and as culturally acceptable for me to pick the regenerative path as it is for me to use conventional practices. And we are not there yet. So we have to make sure that if you choose to use cover crops, you're still eligible for crop insurance. We have to make sure if you're doing, water saving technologies, it doesn't hurt your ability to get credit. And right now, too many farmers are faced with not qualifying or not using the regenerative path because it might disqualify them from other levels of support. So we can align incentives. And then, the last thing I think we have to think about is creating certainty. So many of these regenerative practices also include things like diversification of the crops that you produce, and Esther already mentioned that. They need markets. And so it's important that governments also keep their eye on the fact that regenerative systems need to be productive systems, and so we need supply chains. We need to maintain and open new markets. We need to make sure the cold chain and the processing facilities are available so that those regenerative practices are an integrated part of farmer business models that they can use to be profitable as well as productive.
I'm so glad you brought up that infrastructure point. That is so integral to everything about regenerative agriculture. If the markets aren't there, if the infrastructure isn't there, it's not going to work. Thank you so much. And I want to come back to some of the things you said before about, incentivizing and what that actually looks like and means and how we can get governments and the private sector to do that. So that leads me to Ezgi. The private sector has a lot of opportunity here to bring scaling mechanisms towards nature positive solutions. There's so much opportunity for you all. And I'm wondering how companies can raise their ambitions and actions towards that transition, that transformation to regenerative agriculture systems.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having me here. So for those of you that may not be familiar with AB InBev, we are the world's leading brewer with operations across nearly 50 countries around the world. We source directly from farmers in over a dozen countries. So, we see the far-reaching implications and impacts of climate change around the world in terms of crop loss, crop disease. We try and understand the farmer problems. I really appreciate the farmer perspectives today. That's really what we look for, because we know that if we tackle farmer problems, we can tackle our business problems. So our point of entry could be about supply security and that resilience, but ultimately what we're really trying to solve for is local innovation, local markets. And I really appreciate the RC's comments around, yes, you need financing, yes, you need policy, yes, you need research, but ultimately you also need the markets, because if you don't have that consistent demand for that crop, you can't really cascade any of these solutions at scale. So we need to increasingly work closer together. We need to rethink what development finance looks like. We need to rethink how private sector can shoulder a greater sense of leadership in that community. At AB InBev, one of our biggest crops, our biggest crop actually, is barley. Barley is a crop grown in rotation. So now, as we're looking at it more broadly from an ecosystem and nature angle, as we're thinking through regenerative agricultural practices and how we engage with the farmers as trusted partners on the field through our economists, extension teams, we're starting to think, okay, how does barley support the broader food systems? Because it's usually grown in rotation with soy or wheat or potatoes, depending on the geography. So there's a lot the private sector can do if they bring that systems level view and if they really look to partner with others. And I think, as a beverage company, I think it's fair to say we've done this quite well for years when it comes to watershed and thinking through kind of long-term restoration conservation activities and solutions. And the Nature Conservancy has been one of our biggest partners in how we think through those and different interventions and really thinking through the local context when we look at water security. So when you look at food security, it's exactly the same. You have to really think through the local context. You have to really understand the soil health. You have to understand the biodiversity impacts around. So for us, these are the types of things that we're starting to be more intentional about as we look into the food systems as well, as it's rising on the agenda and as we try to invest in future food systems.
Absolutely, and you're thinking about farmers more, and I think that's key to all of this. This is why there's so many farmers on this panel, which has not been the case at COP, which is a terrible disservice to our food and agriculture system. So I want to congratulate the Nature Conservancy for making sure that farmers were on this panel. But Ezgi, one of the things that I think that the beverage industry, the brewery industry in particular, has an opportunity to do for more nature positive solutions is upcycling. I know barley is a product that can be upcycled in so many ways, and it's nutritious, and it can be different kinds of beverages can be put into food products.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you think of the brewing industry and our operating model, I'd like to think that it's fairly circular in nature. The two-way bottles that we have in many markets around the world, we try to protect and promote that circularity in our packaging, post-consumer use. But yes, similarly in our brewing ingredients as well, because when you look at barley, at the end of the brewing process, that spent grain, we actually call it the brewer's saved grain. There's a lot of nutritional value still left in it. So over the last few years, we've been investing in R&D to try and figure out how to extract the protein and the fiber left in it. And recently we launched a new facility in St. Louis in Missouri to put together basically an ingredients company that is from this upcycled product, and really thinking through the nutritional value that it can bring to many others as well. And it would be a low carbon solution too. So we absolutely try and capture as much value as we can out of it, because we've been very resourceful as a company, and I think now that we're starting to apply that into sustainability and how we think of sustainability as a design problem,
Right.
you can really start tackling it as, what does a good design look like? How do I design my products better, my processes better, my partnerships better?
And again, that goes back to infrastructure, both the intellectual infrastructure that companies need to have and the real actual infrastructure.
Can I add just one thing to that?
Of course.
We feed brewers grain to our cows. So we put it in the
Yes.
diet, in the mix that we feed the cows, and they're fed brewers grain.
Yeah, so for years we've been selling it for cattle feed, but there's an opportunity to upcycle it even more and give it a purpose of higher value, and actually now we're doing it at food grade level.
For human nutrition and,
That's
and,
right.
and nutrient density. That's great. Fabio, I'm hoping I can turn to you to talk about how financial institutions across the public, private, and multilateral sectors, what they're doing and how they can raise their own ambitions and drive actions towards supporting that transition to more positive, nature-positive solutions.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It's an honor for me. And I believe that we are in a transition time for financial sector as a whole. We are acting in 2021, in 2022, as we are in the agenda of the century 2020. We are looking for the future using the agenda of the past. So we are using the agenda of the risk to analyze the products of the positive or the incentive for the next agenda that we have to put in place for the net positive for the farmers. So I believe that a financial system as a role should increase the number of the products that can have a contribution for the climate strategy and for the generate food production that could feed the global system with the contribution for the conservation of the nature, the biodiversity, the water production, and the climate strategies that is achieved 2050 in a net zero financial system. I had here a very great briefing from my team in Brazil, but I also put here my notes that I listened from all the panel I've been listened during this week. That is really a reality for our country in Brazil. We are the most important country when we thinking on biodiversity and food production, and we are here discussing what we will do against deforestation. There is an agenda that, of course, we have to combat, but this is the century, the past century is not the agenda of the next generation. We have to work in partnership of all the organization we have here, all the banks that are standing in COP27 here, and construct building an agenda for the future. How we will funding the small producers, how we will create an alliance between the big producers, between the trades, between all the sellers and buildings in the world to generate regenerative agriculture in the world. Without this, we will not achieve the climate goals that we are discussing here in this event, in this convention center. And this is not an agenda that depends on the financial system. the cost of capital is the same if I finance the regenerative agriculture or the traditional one. I don't receive less money or more money because of this, because the financial logic is the same. We have to change the mind, we have to change the models, but it's depend on time and depend on the perception of the investors in the world. In Brazil, I didn't see the demand of the investors for this kind of business. So when we thought about, financial system has the responsibility to change or to do the things working. I agree with you who think about that. But I also think that it's not the financial system alone. We depend on the wishes of all the partners in this great alliance. If you look at the GDP of Brazil, the important part of our economic system, of our economic activities is food production. If we have a sensitive impact of climate change in food production there, we will have an important impact in GDP. So when we talk about regenerative system, in the end of the day, we are talking about our increase in GDP. Bioeconomy represents for us the next step in our increase in economic system. For us, is a social development, is the way we can put in economic system more population that now is out of the system, is the way we can solve the problem of inclusion of population that is out of the system in Brazil. So we can connect the things. Forestry is not out of the discussion of economic GDP. There is not of discussion of regenerative food. There is not of discussion of what will be our country and our world in the next century. So the things should connect it and work together.
Thank you for all of that. And you brought up a really important point that the finance community, the investment community can't do it alone. Neither can the nonprofit sector, and neither can philanthropy. You all have to work together. So Purvi, I'm wondering what, again, philanthropy can't do this alone, but you have an important role to play in sort of pushing others to sort of unlock the positive levers that can move us toward a more regenerative, transformational food system that actually nourishes all.
Thanks very much, Daniel. And I think as a last speaker right now, I'm going to pick up from some of the points that you've all raised. What is very interesting to see is 67% of the farmers in the world, whether it is the developing country farmers or developed countries, on an average, in a farmer's perception study said, if given a choice, they would like to come out of farming. And what's the fundamental reason behind that? The fundamental reason behind that actually is two that you all have raised. One is the constant battle on falling productivity. And second is the constant battle of accessing the market and having a stable market with less volatility and vulnerability. One very interesting thing, and for many years I worked in Kenya, and one very interesting thing in Swahili that they say is, smaller the farmer, their dependence on God and governance is the highest, right? God is the factors of nature and governance is the factors of policy. Smaller the farmer, the policies also affect them the most, right? How much subsidy am I going to get? Am I going to get it or not? Who's going to buy from me? Will somebody buy or not? Any of these things are very, very important. And market is a factor just beyond the agriculture output factors. It is a lot of factors. For example, in most developing countries, the holding capacity of a farmer, which means the farmer's ability to hold on to a crop or to store the crop, is less than 4%. Which means most of the farmers in developing countries are actually what we can call it is doing a distress sale because they can't hold on, right? And often, our definition of of how do you define a farmer as a large farmer or a small farmer is by the land holding capacity that farmer has. Land really does not mean anything. It is the soil quality that means everything, right? So I could be a farmer with 100 hectares of land, but if that land is an arid land and which might become more arid because of the climate factor, I actually am a very poor farmer. I could be a farmer with only half a hectare of land but a good soil quality, and it could be so one should not be, we should stop defining a farmer in terms of how much land that person holds, and therefore have every policy define it that way and decide what policy support that farmer needs. It should be based on the soil quality. And that reminds me of the livestock sector that you spoke about, right? I think it's already a very, very mixed farming system, right? India, for example, which hosts about 24% of the world's farming population. India, for example, 83% of India's milk does not come from livestock farmers. It comes from crop farmers who also happen to keep a livestock as a diversification strategy. And so diversifying their agriculture system has always been the biggest risk management strategy for farmers. And
Absolutely.
so everything that we do, I think the silos between livestock and crop comes at this level. It is not at the farmer's level, right? And so these are some of the very, very important aspects to look at. In terms of the role people like us or the role the public sector in general can play is, I think, number one is to make the farmer technology ready, capacitate the farmer for absorption of the right technologies, make the farmers market ready by giving that economy of scale so that the private sector also would be interested in investing into that. And I'm sitting next to the banker, make the farmer investment ready. You know, it was intriguing when the minister, the UK minister just this morning right now in this panel said that 55% of the UK's funding is going only to 10% of the farmers. This is a case in every country.
Absolutely.
This is a case if it's in the UK, it's the case in every developing country also.
Sure.
And so democratizing our efforts is where people can play a catalytic role in bringing farmer up to that level for absorption of any of these efforts that we are talking about.
Thank you so much, Purvi, and you bring up so many interesting points to me, including, defining productivity around soil quality rather than the size of the farm. But one thing that brings me back to Fabio and Erski is this idea of to reduce risk management, farmers need financial institutions and foundations to reduce those risks with diversify, and that Purvi mentioned. And I wonder how you both think about that. How do you reduce the risks? Because farmers are risk averse for many, many reasons, including the climate crisis. How can we reduce the risks for them to diversify?
Well, we have a very specified ESG analysis that covered not only environmental but also climate issues when analyzing culture and geographies. Brazil is a huge country that is kind of a continent in terms of geography, and we analyze the cultures, the climate issues, the deforestation focus based on geo-referenced images from satellites, and together with the Amazon institution from Brazil, we developed a methodology to analyze if the project has ESG criteria associated to give some benefits, economic benefits for the project. We are managing both sides of the coin, the risk from one side and the ESG contribution in a net positive way in the other side. We have many positive examples to discuss. In Brazil, we have a legal reserve that is established by law, depending on the biome and on the size of the land. The rural producers should preserve a percentage of the property, and we create a financial product that if the producers preserve 30% plus of what the law established, we pay, we have a discount in the tax interest of the product, and they have a benefit because they are preserving more than the law established. And we have more than 5 million reais in funding related to this project until now. And we are, and the producers are also committed to not deforestate the Cerrado, that is another biome in Brazil, when they have lands. So we are creating strategies to put together a positive way. Together with TNC and together with Syngenta, we create a Revert. There is a program to restore the degraded pasture and to create again the possibility to make another plantation in that area. And we are doing more based on positive way. We have challenges because as a financial institutions, we can't monitoring what the performance of environmental or carbon in that land. So we have to act in partnership with other organizations, and these have a cost. So the cost we are assuming as a bank, but we can't assume it for all the clients. We have to put everything together. So funding is a problem, cost is another problem, methodologies is a challenge that we have to face. So we have to work in partnership again.
The collaboration is key. Erzgi.
So I would say, again, putting the farmer at the center of everything you do. That's where it starts.
Absolutely.
And if you do that, then everything else comes naturally around how you approach it as from a systems level, think through the field level, think through that household level, right? And then crop diversification and access to finance comes into play. But I would say, at ABI in 2018, we've announced our smart agriculture goal, which was 100% of our farmers that we work with directly around the world will be skilled, connected, and financially empowered. And what do we mean by that? Skilled, access to improved seed and crop varieties, access to agronomic advice through extension teams, through agronomists in the field, connected, being connected to data, weather insights, market insights.
To one another.
Really thinking through, to each other, exactly. We actually started implementing this tool called Smart Barley, where it's an opt-in for the farmer to provide field level, farm level data so that they can actually benchmark against each other, because this they find really valuable as well. And
Absolutely.
it's a two-way engagement. It's not just that we're collecting data for disclosure purposes. We're actually, going back to them with that data so that it can reinforce our capacity building, technical assistance efforts. And then lastly, the financial empowerment, the access to crop insurance, to financial markets. But to be able to do that, that farmer, that smallholder farmer needs to exist in your supply chain. And today, in many companies of our size, let's say, that farmer is so removed from your ecosystem.
Sure.
Again, I'm fortunate that I work for an industry where the supply chain is short and simple. Over 50% of our barley around the world, we know where it comes from, down to the name of the farmer, the field. You can actually now build a long-term relationship with them in how you think of tackling these farmers. So you can't just create markets for 1 year, 2 year, and then walk away and say, okay, now I'm into another crop.
Yeah.
So how we think about some of those things, how we think of behavioral change. Because think about it, regenerative agricultural practices is going to require behavioral change that has been that behavior that has been passed on from generation to generation. I'm from Cyprus. I come from a family of strawberry growers. But yes, I remember my grandmother growing, to this day she still grows, citrus, plums, grapes, almonds, whatever they can. And yes, there would be some seasons where that crop would fail, and they would wait for the aggregator to come in, and sometimes the aggregator would say, no, I'm only going to buy 10 kilos of this and not the 15 kilos that you have.
Sure.
So what do you do, right? So how do you create that consistent demand? So, these are the types of things that if you bring in that long-term solution and try to solve the farmer problem, you can really approach this from a systems level and invite others in. I know every panel you sit through, you hear this. We cannot do it alone, and we need partnerships. But I cannot iterate the importance of partnerships and how we can all really come together and think through this, but not individually, not research for the sake of research, not policy because that's what international policy demands, not financing because we know that we need it, or It's all of it to create that market access, to create that long-term demand for that crop.
Absolutely. And even though it's been said at every panel, it is key. Collaboration is key. Otherwise, none of this is going to work, and we are not going to get to where we need to go. Esther, the farmer-centered approach is so important, and as Ersky mentioned. But I'm from your perspective, how does that work when we're talking about corporations and financial institutions? What are your thoughts?
Yes, thank you very much for asking that. And actually, my thought process has been triggered by the phrase, we are dependent on God and government. No? And actually, that is true. And that is why in this session, when we ask scaling up of regenerative approaches, what we really want to see is a bold action. And that bold action is really empowering the small-scale family farmers, because these are majority, 80% of the family farming population in the world. And they have been left out by government policies, by incentives, by financing. And so the bold action is to look at these people, look at these small-scale family farmers, and empower them so that they can claim their policies with their governments. We have to fight for these policies in many ways in our countries. Engage the governments, diplomatically lobby and advocacy them. Yes, we need empowerment. We need the skill set for that. There is market there, usually. But our market power is very weak. So we need to organize ourselves into associations, commodity clusters, and cooperatives so that we could have the necessary volume and then voice to negotiate with companies like you so that trade will be fair and just for us. And I hope that it will also reduce the transaction cost of companies if we are organized, if you talk to just one organization representing thousands of family farmers. So this is the bold action that we like to ask in any COP, so that invest in family farming agriculture and finance the work that we do for climate adaptation with strong mitigation potential so that we can unleash the millions of farmers, especially small-scale farmers, in the work and in partnering with government, with companies in the work for climate adaptation with very strong mitigation potential through agroecology, integrated, diversified, organic farming in farms, fisheries, and forests. This is what we understand by the word regenerative approaches. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Esther. So on that point, Darcy, I want to give you the last word. TNC, the Nature Conservancy, has done so much incredible work on bringing these collaborations together, right? And I'm wondering, as you look at the future, as you look at the next COP, how do we make sure that this isn't the last COP where there are 4 food pavilions and many, many partners like you bringing food and agriculture to the table, that this is consistent from now on, that food and agriculture systems are part of the dialogue at every COP, whether it's around the climate crisis or the biodiversity COP that happens a week from now, I think, in Montreal. How do we make sure that what you and the Nature Conservancy are promoting are at these COPs?
Well, that's a great question. And I think, first of all, think 5 years ago, think 10 years ago, this was not part of the conversation. So we've made a lot of progress. And you've already heard on this panel how many things we're trying, right? That there are different techniques, there's different types of investment. We have heard over and over again, and I think we still need to, what's the farmer experience with this? And, you know, I'm a policy person, right? I'm looking at policy approaches, investing in, you know, providing seed funding, providing proof of concept to be able to unleash a lot of the work that others do here, and that needs to continue. So part of it is working with our governments to say, how can we shape? This is a farm bill year in the United States, which controls not only money on how U.S. farmers are going to plant their crops, but also some of the outreach we do internationally. How can we make sure that we think about that from a farmer perspective? What gives the most possible choice? And again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. What makes the regenerative choice easy, accessible, affordable, and culturally accepted? And those are, the 4 keys. And I would say what I've heard on this panel are some very specific stories of why that's important. And I actually think one of the most important things we can do between now and the next COP is start crystallizing those stories into very specific examples of where farmers face trade-offs that make doing the regenerative thing difficult, to identify those barriers, to think about how we address them, and to specifically call for cooperation to fix it. But if we don't highlight it in very tangible terms, it will be difficult for us to get to the COP that really focuses on solutions and not just the high-level discussion.
Thank you so much, Darcy, and so many great points made today. And this farmer-centered approach is necessary for this to work, and also the collaboration, which we keep talking about. And your last point about the storytelling, that is so important to amplify, and the great work that the farmers on this panel are doing, that the companies, that the foundations are doing, and that the nonprofits are doing as well. I want to thank our panelists, and I want to thank all of you for sticking around. Round of applause, please.